Okay, everyone, welcome to Demise's Guide to Line of Sight and Diagonal Movement. Now, I apologize that this is a late video, but you will be very happy to see this. If you already know the lessons that will be in this, please still leave your support, leave a like, because this is going to be pretty much the premium resource for new players, or it will be, I believe, one of the classics when it comes to things that people will look at when they're when they're learning the game. So this is about line of sight, how to use it, and diagonal movement and how to use it. So we start off with diagonal movement. Um, so yeah, let's get started. So what is diagonal movement? So as a new player, it's pretty straightforward, I guess, or it seems obvious. The arrow keys would move you up, left, right, and down. But what is often missed and or forgotten is the fact that you can actually move diagonally. Now, this is an extremely powerful tool for new players to increase their win rate, increase their chances of surviving the early game, and etc. etc. It's very powerful as a tool. And the reason why it is powerful is because you can use it to turn corners quickly, which I will explain to you guys in a bit. And if you do this smartly, it actually decreases the damage that you take from early game enemies. Now, the way that you move diagonally, you can use it with Y, U, B, or N. So Y will be diagonal up, will be up left, U will be up right, B will be down left, and N will be down right. Or you can use the numpad 7913, but I honestly don't think that that's good for a couple of reasons. First of all, not every computer has a numpad. I know, for example, that a lot of my laptops that I've played a lot of games on have never had a numpad. Secondly, it does take your right hand away from a lot of the stuff on the right hand side of the keyboard, which can get really annoying real fast. YUBN tends to be my go-to movements for go-to commands for diagonal buttons or diagonal movement, and I use the arrow keys. So I use a kind of a hybrid style. Using HJKL for up, down, left, right movement, or orthogonal movement, I guess. That is the V key or Vi key style with YUBN as well. That's used by like more old school players, but I tend to have uh, a hybridy kind of style. Like newer players tend to use the numpad because it's easy to use and like it's very intuitive. Old players will use YUBN, HJKL. I use a hybrid. I use YUBN and the arrow keys. So it is possible to do both, but like I said, the numpad I'm not a fan of for movement because of just how slow it is compared to everything else. Now, I just want to point out one thing that you might not know. Pressing shift and then a button to move, including the arrow keys, will use a semi-half. It will use like a semi-auto explore style. So what that does is when you are trying to turn a corner or you see an enemy, it will automatically stop you from moving. But until it does that, it will continue to move in one direction. So you see me use it a lot in labyrinths. I actually use it constantly to move around corners, so that if I see an enemy, I don't automatically just start running into them. You can use this, but I won't get into that too much today. That'll be for a different video on auto exploring and exploring techniques. All right, so let's first get to straight to the point, I guess. How do we use it? Now, I will say this. This took me a buttload of time for me to get these screenshots. I actually had to play a game through the early game, check for situations that I thought were relevant, and then screenshot each individual move. Please God, send me some likes, guys. I really worked hard for this one. All right, like put me up on Reddit, boys. Come on. If this ain't on Reddit, I'm gonna be so sad. Nah, whatever. Like seriously, but this is a good resource. All right. So anyway, so how do we use it? Let's take for example our basic Minotaur Berserker. I don't know which account this is, but it is mine, and I actually played it just then, so I should probably know. Let's say that there's an enemy right next to us, the Kobold in this scenario, right? It's in melee with us. And let's say that, for example, we're not on full health, or that's not a Kobold, it's like a crazy as hell enemy, like I don't know, an ogre. And it's capable of killing us in maybe 2 to 3 hits. Now, this is a very specific scenario that comes up a lot of the time. This is the L-bend situation, where, as you can see, I'm not sure if you can actually see my mouse. I don't believe you can. Alright, that sucks. Now, okay, fine. Let's just do it like descriptive wise. Okay. So if you, as you see where the Minotaur is, this is a very common L-bend style. You actually see that there's a corner that we have to turn here. Now, there are two ways of doing of turning this corner. One without diagonal movement and one with diagonal movement. And you're going to see exactly what the difference between the two are. So let's just look at without diagonal movement. The first step you would take is to move right. So that's what a lot of new players would use. So comparing it to the previous position, we moved here, we were standing right there at the edge of the corner, we moved right. Now at this stage the goblin has not hit us yet. But in order for us to escape, we now have only one option, to move down. We could also fight the guy, but then if we fought the guy, we should have fought him over here. But yeah, like just pretend again that's not an enemy that we can fight, blah blah blah, something something something. This is a 10 speed enemy that's just more dangerous than we can handle right now, or we wish to walk away from for the time being. So if we move down, as you can see here, my character has taken a hit, and it was actually very lucky that I didn't get miss here. But as you can see, I got hit. My character actually lost hit points while moving down, because as I was moving down, the goblin was still adjacent to my character, and thus it could get a free attack. This causes me to take damage, so the goblin hits you, right? And this is the wrong way to go about it. Using orthogonal movement or up, down, left, right movement, straight movement, I guess, in corners is a horrible idea. If this was not a kobold and this was an ogre, and I had 25 HP and the ogre's max damage is like 35, there's a chance that I just straight up die because I make that mistake. Other times I could be on 5 HP and the enemy could only have to hit me for 5 hit points. And if I'm making a mistake like this, I will take that 5 hit points for free when I didn't have to. Of course, there's obviously the chance that I don't get hit in that situation. But as you can see, even in this scenario where I actually screen capped it, I got hit. So don't like just pretend that it's not going to happen. Alright. So let's look at with diagonal movement. And so here's a more realistic-ish scenario. We got a hobgoblin on D1 with a club. He has bashed our face in. We're at half HP, and we're trying to walk away from it because we want to reset the fight. As you can see, he's at full health. We're at like half health. We might die. Who knows? Now, with diagonal movement, what we'll use is the U key. So we'll move up right. So, bam, like that. You see that? So as you can see, the enemy has not been able to hit us because he's still moving. Enemies cannot attack and move at the same time unless they get random energy, which is a bullshit mechanic, but we'll get into that later. As you can see, because I move diagonally, he does not get the opportunity to hit us as we move around the corner. So we've navigated the corner by taking a tighter turn. Because we've taken that turn, that one turn difference, he is not able to attack us, and it's almost as if we were moving in a straight line. This can be chained. So if you see on the second panel, the Minotaur can now move right and then down right to turn the corner again, rather than turning the corner. Actually, let's look at the first one, I guess. You can't see my mouse, but I'm looking at the first panel right here. As you see, if I move up right and then right, I can either move right and down or down right. If I move down right, again, I will be turning a corner with sharp turns, and this will let me avoid the damage. But if I obviously moved without diagonal movement, I'd take an extra hit. So if you think about the type of, like in this specific scenario, I'm actually taking 3 hits if I don't use diagonal movement. 1 for the first corner, 2 for the second corner, 3 for the third. So I'm taking 3 hits for free. If I use diagonal movement, I take 0 hits. So as you can see, the enemy won't hit us. And this is absolutely the correct way to move. And this is a movement that you'll see me do a lot of the time, but I don't go into it too often because, you know, sometimes I'm just talking and it comes naturally. With time and practice, it's very, very useful to use diagonal movement. It's very useful. It's an absolute bread and butter skill of any budding, developing, experienced, whatever player. It is absolutely necessary. It will avoid so much damage over the course of your games that you will there is a good chance that you will get to lair for your first time after watching this video just because you avoided some lethal amount of damage along the way. It's so obvious to experienced players that it's something that rarely is really considered until it pops up in someone's game and you're like, oh wait, that's wrong. It's something that should be a general principle of crawl, just in a learning sense. So please make sure that you use diagonal movement from now on every time you turn a corner. And in general, just learn how to use diagonal movement. Alright. So now we're going to go on to the more difficult and much more complicated area, using line of sight. So line of sight is referring to what you can see on the map, right? I don't think that's too controversial. Now, what I'm gonna teach you here is how to use diagonal movement to restrict line of sight on enemies by turning corners. And there are two general rules when it comes to line of sight, and you should generally follow these. There are exceptions, but this is the general idea. If you're a melee guy, you want less line of sight, so you want to restrict your line of sight, and you want to be in melee. So you want to always be in melee with enemies, and you want to have less line of sight. It's fairly obvious. You don't want ranged enemies pelting away at you from full screen. You want them to come right up to you. And if you're ranged, you want range, and therefore more line of sight. So you should be making moves to increase your line of sight while not disadvantaging you against enemies that are also ranged. So that's a little bit more complicated in and of itself. And that's a skill that you'll have to develop over the course of your games. So let's look at restricting the line of sight with corner turning. Now, let's take, for example, this game, same game, Minotaur Berserker, and there's a goblin with a sling. Let's pretend for a moment here that that's not a goblin with a sling. Let's pretend it's a orc wizard, orc priest. It's a centaur, right? This is a dangerous enemy in range. I couldn't find one because it's freaking hard to do that in one game. It's hard to find the optimal scenario, and obviously this isn't even the optimal scenario, but it's good enough for what I'm trying to show. So here, as you can see, I'm standing right at the enemy is standing right at the edge of my line of sight. I could charge it down, but let's count how many tiles that would take. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 tabs would get me into melee with that enemy. In that time, that enemy has 6 turns to react. 6 turns. If it's a centaur, you're already dead. Unless you're a Minotaur Berserker with good armor, then you're not dead. But like, if you're a weak character, you're dead already. It's too late, right? So don't rush it down in this scenario. Let's look at what we can do instead. So as you can see in the second movement, I have used the U button to move diagonally upright. Now this has not yet restricted the line of sight. This is not restricted line of sight. The enemy can still see me and fire at me. However, in the turn that I moved upright, the enemy actually moved right 1 tile as well. If you can look at it by lining it up with the staircase. It moved at the same time as me. Now note that that's really important. The reason why that's the case is because the enemy cannot shoot and move at the same time. So that movement is essentially free. Now note again that this does not count towards enemies that are extremely fast, like centaurs. It is possible that they can shoot and move, but that will be subject to random energy. So let's just ignore that situation because, honestly, it's too complicated to think about. It's too mathematical. It's better to just think about this general case. Moving upright will not restrict our line of sight yet. Now let's look at what actually has restricted our line of sight. Bam. So if you look here, we've actually moved up left. So we moved upright and then up left with the Y key. So it's U. The inputs so far have been U, Y. And this has moved us around the corner. And as you can see, the enemy has actually left our line of sight. He is now around the corner. This is why I like to call it corner turning. It's obvious, right? The enemy has moved out of line of sight, and now he can no longer shoot at us. In fact, he can't even see us. He knows where we are, but he cannot see us. And this is where we rest. Now, this is a weird thing, but you'll actually stop here and press the S button, or 5, until the enemy appears back in line of sight. Why? Because you're a melee character. You can't kill someone through a wall. You don't have map hacks like that. Like, even mages don't really have that. So you have to get that guy in melee with you. So you're going to wait for him to catch up to you so that you're in this position. And as you can see, the gap has gone from 6 tiles to 1 tile. And at no point in time was he able to actually attack you. So turning the corner here has basically meant that you teleported 5 steps forward. That was really good, wasn't it? Very simple. 2 turns, 5 steps. Insane. Alright. Now, here we're going to count the movement of the enemy and shuffle to the rhythm of that enemy. And this is what I like to, I do this a couple of times, but I actually shuffle back and forth in the corner while I wait for the enemy. So, right here, let's take a look at what we did. So we moved 1 tile to the right. Right? Ooh, look at that arrow. Damn, I'm good. I moved 1 tile to the right. So let's look back here. I moved 1 tile to the right. In that time, the enemy moved 1 tile up. Well, he actually moved up, but I showed it as diagonal up, but it makes the same sense. You got to remember that crawl works in with a unified time, a unified clock. Every turn you move, a 10-speed enemy moves the same speed. So I've counted that he would be moving 1 extra tile as I moved right, I moved left, and he moves up. Then I move right again, and now I'm in melee with the enemy. Enemies with ranged weapons are stupid. They will switch to melee even if they don't have a melee weapon, so they'll just switch to their fists if you actually get in melee with them. This is, of course, not the same with mages, with orc mages, which I believe can still cast spells, though I may be wrong. But anyway, again, exceptional part. You'll just have to figure that out yourself. I can't think of it right now. But as you can see here, I did not take a single hit in this entire scenario either, because I counted where the enemy was going to be. So if I had stayed in this position, in the bottom position right here, and I'd press S again and again and again, the enemy would still be inclined to shoot at me with the rocks because he's in range. I could press Tab 1 time forward to go forward from him, but there is an issue with that as well. As you can see in this scenario here, I'm actually in a much more restricted line of sight area in general, not just against this one enemy. This allows me to protect myself against enemies that come from the south. It is quite a useful position in general because I can just quickly turn a corner and escape anyway. And I can rinse and repeat this shuffling movement to bring any enemy that I want from the south into my line of sight. It's a very complicated strategy when you talk about it like this, but when you do it in practice, it's actually very simple. You just simply shuffle back and forth until the enemy is in an optimal position, like just exactly 1 tile as in the top, and then you move right 1 tile, and then he's in melee with you. Very simple strategy, useful against all types of ranged enemies. Also useful against strong melee enemies that you wish to just engage around a corner, because, line of sight things. Now this is the second line of sight example, and I like to call this one mugging the prick when he turns the corner. So what we're going to do here is, there's a wizard in a dark, weird tower of whatever, and he's in a corridor basically, right? We're on low-ish HP, and we're like, oh, okay, it's time to leave. Now what I do here is I move to the left 1 tile. Again, the enemy turns just completely bonkers. He's like, where did that guy go? I don't even know. And as he turns the corner, we just rush him and then smack him down. It's a pretty straightforward strategy. It's a very, very effective strategy as well for dealing with enemies in the same way. Now note that the difference between this particular scenario, the first example, and the second one, is that the first one requires you to make 2 movements out of a corner. You basically turn like 2 corners if you think about it. This one only requires 1. This is very useful in T-junction or T-intersection areas where you have a long stretch of corridor intersecting another long stretch of corridor. You can use this to mug the prick when he gets around the corner. It's very useful, and again, it prevents the enemy from doing nasty things at you at range. The poor melee bastards never got a chance, but once he's in melee, he's in your domain. You can just kill him, like so. So that's a very straightforward example. Now, one last thing that I want to talk about is mage line of sight. Now, restricted line of sight. Now, forgive the tile. I'm still the berserker. I'm not going to start a mage just to show you this. But I essentially just want to talk kind of quickly about restricted versus open line of sight. Now, for mages, as I said before, and in general for range, I should have said mage or range, but range is a meme. You don't really use that. Mages tend to want to have vision. The reason why they want to have vision is because range is the safety spot. The enemies that are at range can't hit you because you're actually ranged and the enemies are melee. So it's kind of the opposite of how a melee reacts to mages in a Minotaur game, for example. Here, I'm just going to show you 2 positions, and I'm going to just quickly talk about their advantages and disadvantages. Let's take, for example, this example. This is an example of restricted line of sight. Now let's take a look at the vision that we have right here. So in terms of, imagine there's an enemy to the left-hand side. Let's look at where we can attack. We can attack all the way up to the staircase. We can also attack all the way up to the corner. You can't see this, but I'm actually swinging my arm around for some reason. As you can see here, I have a mediocre-ish like level of line of sight. And the reason why is because of the tile that has been crossed, the two tiles that are being crossed over with my upwards arrow. Because those two tiles are restricting my line of sight, I can't actually see anything up there. I actually don't have the range. And let's look at our retreat options while we're at it. As you can see, I can move left, I can move right to retreat with the blue arrow. I can move down, or I can move up. Now, just quickly, what do you think is the right option here? What do you think is are the best options if there are multiple? I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds just to pause the video. Okay, that's enough time. Now, which one would be the best one to go? The answer is the right side. Now, these two are bad, the up and down, because you're actually losing one turn of initiative. When you turn these corners, it is the same idea as turning an L curve. You're actually losing one turn of line of sight by moving up or down. The enemies will be one turn closer to you. So you losing that one turn of initiative is actually really bad. So only going right is the best idea. So if you think about that, let's just like keep that in mind, okay? So we're going to go to the next position, open line of sight. So let's look back here and let's look forward here. So I've moved 2 steps forward to the left. Now let's look at our range, right? Bam! Suddenly we have 2 tiles of extra range in terms of what we can see. We can also hit all the way up to the top left, and we can also see up to the north as well. So we actually have a lot of line of sight here. We have a lot more. If I moved 1 tile to the right, to the left, I could have even more line of sight, but that's not as necessary. Now, let's look at the positioning idea of this as well. If you look at where we're standing in this position, we actually have a funnel of sorts via the doorway and the corridor. We have a small funnel that we can escape, that we can fight our way into. Here, we can actually fight everything outside and then back off into the corridor. So we haven't actually lost any of our positional advantage. We are simply increasing our line of sight to hit multiple, to be able to find multiple enemies, increase our range, and increase our attack in general. So we actually haven't lost any particular tactical advantage. We still have the same thing. That's the thing you guys have to kind of think about. In addition, this also gives us the opportunity to turn the corner correctly. If you go towards 1 tile to the right of the Minotaur, and you'll notice that you can actually go diagonally up or diagonally down and not lose a turn of initiative. So as you can see, let's look again. This position is bad because up and down are both losing 1 turn of initiative, whereas this position, once we back off, we actually won't lose our initiative. We can move right, up, or down, so we actually have a much better position. This is just a very basic starter on Mage line of sight. Now, just to end things with, oh yeah, so as you can see, you can continue to move right. So just a couple of final tips for ranged line of sight, just so we know. You need to think about who has range superiority. Whoever is stronger at range wants to be the guy who's at range. So if you're fighting a centaur really early on and you're a mage, your priority is to get it into melee because it actually wants to be switching to melee, and then you can use your range stuff on him, which is still stronger than what he's doing to you. Now, obviously, if you have a really early centaur, you might still die if you're in melee, but it will provide you with a much better chance than fighting it at range, because having a firefight at full screen against a centaur is one of the worst things you can do in early dungeon. It is just not going to work for you because your character will fundamentally be too squishy to contest an actual centaur. You won't have enough dodge, you won't have enough fighting, etc. So whoever's at range wants to be the guy who's at range. If you know the enemy has limited range, or you know that they're melee, or you know that they're not fast, you want to be kind of kiting them at full screen and then walking away while keeping full line of sight of them. If they're stronger than you, you want to be turning corners, trying to get that shit into melee, setting up spells beforehand, etc. and so forth. For example, you could use the Conjure Flame from the starting book of the Wizard, or the Fire Elementalist. You could summon an Ice Beast from the Ice book. You could preemptively cast Swiftness on the Air Elementalist. You could Mephitic Cloud the guy before he turns the corner. Like, there's all these strategies that you need to think about once the corner arises. And I think that watching my Mage videos will actually help you a lot in that regard, because I use corners very effectively in conjunction with open line of sight. I actually use combined. So that's it for today. I hope that this has been really helpful. If you do think it's helpful, even if you know the stuff that was already in here, if you think it'd be helpful for a new player, please leave a like, subscribe if you want. I assume most of you guys are subscribed to me anyway, but leave a damn like, because this is the kind of stuff that I've really been interested in doing, and if I do get a positive response, I will be doing it more. This is the kind of stuff that is really important for crawl players. I think that getting the fundamentals in a basic way that really isn't version capped, because this is relevant to every single character, like every single version of this game from now to infinity, unless they remove diagonal movement, right? It's really important, and this is the kind of stuff that really isn't like formalized, I suppose. So if you do enjoy these kind of videos, if you think that it's useful for the community, please leave a like, comment if you have any questions, if you want to just say nice things, if you want to flame me, if you want to talk about how good I am, how much of a cool guy I am, you know, you do you. Just comment, like, subscribe, do all the sellout stuff. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be posting this to Reddit, but if I've fallen asleep and I've forgotten, probably post it to Reddit, because this is going to be an important one. Alright, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all tomorrow.